Hello, everybody. Welcome to Opinion News Network. I'm your host, Daniel Debaba. Today, we are honored to have the Denebo Wario, a prominent voice within the Oromo community, join us to discuss why Ethiopia stands at a crossroads with disintegration looming as a shadow. Welcome, Denebo.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Daniel.
So today we will be discussing why Ethiopia is about to disintegrate and why it should actually if Ethiopia disintegrate that is better for the citizens of Ethiopia. So in this time, for the first time, even Amara journalists, activists, and political opinion leaders have recognized that it's likely Ethiopia will disintegrate, and they have even started to favor disintegration to Ethiopia turning out to be like Somalia, Yemen, and Syria. So I argue it's highly likely that Ethiopia is going to disintegrate in the coming few years, and probably that's a better outcome for Ethiopia and for the people. For the Nebo, as an Oromo activist and Oromo advocate, what do you see is going on right now, and where does Ethiopia stand in terms of stability, and what is the historical context that is likely to push Ethiopia in the direction of disintegration?
Thank you, Daniel, again. And I think that is a very important topic that everyone, not necessarily just from Ethiopia, but everyone from the Horn of Africa, whether it is Oromo or Ethiopia, Tagaru, or Sidama, or Laita, or even Kenya or Somalia, need to discuss, because the issue affects every nation in the Horn of Africa. So when it comes to the potential, rather imminent disintegration of Ethiopia, my take is similar to many of the scholars who have written on this. To mention some example, recently, Alex Dawal, the founder and director of the World Peace Foundation, wrote an article, to use his word, Ethiopia's as an empire, Ethiopia's disintegration is well overdue. So it is the empire is coming into a natural end, naturally dying out. It is coming to an end in this situation because of the way it was constituted in the first place. Because Ethiopia was constituted or established, for those who want to use that word, via violence and genocide and invasion, and in fact assisting the European colonial establishments scramble Africa, split Africa among themselves. So these are the scenario in which Ethiopia came into being in its current shape and form. So, but because of one change in the global geopolitical, social, and legal environment, which I can um, get back to it in particular with that, and also because of the advancement in human rights, those nations that were invaded, that were forcefully incorporated into Ethiopia via violence and genocide. I'm talking about nations such as the Oromo, the Walaita, the Benshangul Gums, and some of which, if you take the likes of Ogaden and Gambela, Ogaden was given to Ethiopia by British uh, imperial establishment as the present, while as Gambela, one of the regions that has already gone, was traded for Kassala, a province in the current day Sudan. So it's a multiple. There are multiple factors. These nations are fighting to restore their own independence. When I say to restore, in the case of Oromo, many people use the term, "Oh, they are fighting for Oromia's independence. They are fighting to get Oromia seceded from Ethiopia." That's wrong, because before Ethiopia, with the help of the European colonial powers, invaded Oromia, the Oromo people were governing themselves. They had their own um, institutions, they had their own system of governance, and they had their own worldview. So it is this sovereign independent nation that was invaded and forcefully incorporated into Ethiopia. So the Oromo are fighting to restore what was taken away. The Ogaden are fighting to restore their independence, their sovereignty. The only difference is when it comes to Tigray, Tigray being the core state of Ethiopia. Even that core state of Ethiopia is demanding, even though these days we don't get to hear lots of these topics as it used to be during the war, still there are parties like the Tigray Independence Party that are pushing for independence. So that is one factor. In short, internal countries or nations in Empire Ethiopia that in the first place were forcefully invaded and incorporated into Ethiopia because of the advancement in human rights, because of the advancement, the change in globalization, in the world of globalization. More and more countries are coming into being, more and more countries are enjoying their independence. So are the countries in Empire Ethiopia. That is one factor. And the other factor is external factors. If you look at the situation Ethiopia is in at the moment, of course, Ethiopia has been implementing genocidal war against Oromo since its inception. It was only the war that the atrocities that Ethiopia had been perpetrating and has continued to perpetrate against the Oromo that recently expanded to Tigray and currently to Amhara region. But the Oromo have already been in war. Ethiopia has always been in violent relationship with Oromo. So there, besides this, there are other external factors, like for example, um, where is Ethiopia's boundaries? Ethiopia does not, as an entity, it does not have well established boundary. As a state, one of the pillars of the state is boundary, and the second one that many agree is people and sovereign government. So if you take boundary in West, Ethiopia claims Sudan has occupied more than 250 kilometers square of land. I'm talking about the Al Fashaka Triangle. But Sudan says, no, I have occupied what belonged to me. Okay? South Sudan has occupied, even going beyond what Ethiopia calls its border, more than 100 kilometers into the territory of Ethiopia, and they have even gone to the extent of changing the administrative structure of towns and cities, including changing names. Okay, in north, Ethiopia's boundary is unknown because the matter has not been resolved with Eritrea. In east, the Somali militants are operating within what they call Ethiopia's territory, about 80 kilometers. So it is not externally, it is not um, stable. There is no, this has been the case for a long time. And this again is related to the factor I mentioned earlier. It is attributed to the way Ethiopia was incepted. The best example for that is the relationship between Egypt and Ethiopia. Egypt is claiming water of Nile, and Egypt is making that claim based on the 1902 treaty that Britain and Emperor Menelik signed. By virtue of Article 3 of that treaty, Britain was given all the rights to possess, to control the water. So the Sudanese case is the same. It is attributed to those treaties that brought Ethiopia into emergence. So it is this combination of all these factors that is bringing Ethiopia into an end. These factors, of course, were intensified or exacerbated by Ethiopia's failure to respect its own constitution. When we talk about
Let's
the
focus
war in
on the Nabo, if you can
Oromia,
hear me.
the war.
Denebo, can you hear me? So let's focus more on internal dynamics, and if we have time, we'll come back to external forces that can force Ethiopia to disintegrate. So let's focus on Ethiopia. Let's look at the historical context for some of our new viewers. Is Ethiopia a country, or is Ethiopia an empire? And what makes it an empire, or what makes it a country? And what historical context, is a recipe for Ethiopia's disintegration? And what are the current issues that we are looking at? And if you touch on those things.
Yeah, people want to politicize some facts when it comes to this very interesting question you posed: is Ethiopia an empire or a country? The fact of the matter is that Ethiopia is an empire where many nations were invaded, incorporated, and jumbled together forcefully. If you take the Oromo were invaded after a bloody war that extended from 1882 all the way to 1909. That it was during this process that Oromia was invaded and incorporated into Ethiopia. And I'm talking about the war that claimed the life of more than half of the Oromo nation. There was this, I think, his French scholar who went to Ethiopia during that time and published a book with first-hand information. The book titled "The Oromo, the Greatest Nation of Africa," and Marshall de Salvic, the author I'm talking about, he gives figure saying during the war of invasion, more than half the population of Oromo died. Why? Because the Oromo people were fighting to maintain their independence, but thanks to the European firearms, thanks to the superiority of Europeans' ammunitions, the Oromo were forcefully invaded and incorporated into Ethiopia. Take Olaita. We're not talking about history of ancient time or medieval time. We're talking about the modern history. The Walaita people was only in 1880 94 that were forcefully, after bloody war, forcefully incorporated into Empire Ethiopia. And all the nations, some of them were given to Ethiopia as part of the process of the scramble for Africa. Uh, Best example for that is the Afar nation. The Afar nation was split into three. Part of the Afar nation was taken by France, the current day Djibouti. Part was given to Italy by the treaty Emperor Menelik signed with the Italian authorities. The first one being the Wuchale Treaty, and ironically, even after Italy was defeated, they signed another treaty for Italy to continue to occupy that land. So Afar was given to Italy. Part of Afar was given to Italy, which is the Red Sea area of the current day Eritrea. And the other part of the Afar nation was given to um, Ethiopia, the Afar region. Why were the Oromo split into two? As you know, the northern Kenya, um, inhabited by the Oromo nation, and that was because Menelik negotiated, um, struck a deal with Britain colonial establishment, and some part of the Oromo was given to Britain. So this was the context in which Ethiopia came into being. Which nation gave consent? Okay, some people say, "Oh, that was the order of the day. That was how all empires were established." That's right. That's how all empires were established. But we are living in an era where empires that were established through that way either disappeared or recognized the rights of the nations they invaded. That is why, before the Second World War, the number of independent countries in the world was less than 50. And today there are more than 195, almost pushing 200 states. This is because the right to independence, the right of people to self-determine, is the what constitutes the international collaboration among states, or in other words, it's what is serving as a founding pillar of the Charter of the United Nations. The other parts of the world have moved on. Ethiopia has remained, intact through violence and through genocide, and by stifling the people that are demanding their freedom, even by violating Ethiopia's constitution itself. So this is a scenario, and at the moment, I like I said earlier, Ethiopia is coming to an end, um, because nations are claiming their natural rights. And let me add to that, Daniel, one point. Some people say, "Oh, Ethiopia is, you know, becoming like Syria or Libya." Um, I disagree with that assertion, because Syria, in the first place, is one country. It's not just one country. It is a country of almost unified culture, predominantly one religion. The reason why Syria is in civil war is not because nations in Syria are demanding their right to self-determine. It's because of lack of good governance. Is there any nation in Syria, apart from tiny bit of Kurdish, that are fighting for self-determination, for independence? No. In Libya, the same. Libya is almost unified country, um, with almost similar culture, with similar and predominantly one religion. Um, they're not fighting because countries in Libya were invaded and incorporated forcefully into Libya. So the scenario that resembles, or the scenario that Ethiopia resembles, rather, is that of Yugoslavia. Because in Yugoslavia, the same way Ethiopia was structured, one country invaded others, and that was how Yugoslavia was constituted, because the nations in the then Yugoslavia demanded their freedom, independence. They fought for it, and Yugoslavia disappeared from the map. But those nations um, that emerged, or that became independent as a result of disappearance or through the process of the disappearance of Yugoslavia, have now better relationship among themselves and enjoying better peace and prosperity. And there is no reason why nations within the the box of Ethiopia will not enjoy prosperity and peaceful relationship if this stumbling block called Ethiopia disappears. That's my assessment, Daniel.
Thank you, Denebo. When I look at Ethiopia, we entertain an ongoing clashes between nations. There is a very strong fighting between the Amara and the Oromo. The Amara, especially the Amara extremist group called the Fanos, they travel to cross over to Oromia and claim land in Walaga region, in Horoguru Walaga region, which can be called a province in other countries or a prefecture. They invade the Oromo civilians in North Shawa. They invade the Oromo civilians living in Karayu in East Shawa. Um, they invade Oromos living in Wallo, and they claim land, and they also claim the capital itself, which is in the middle of Oromia. Let me try to show one map that they have been using, especially recently. Um, if you look at this map, this is the one on the left is the one that Amara nationalists is currently using, such as the Iskender Naga, who recently established Amara Popular Front or Amara People's Front. And as you can see, this map takes large portion of Oromia and takes large portion of Afar, takes large portion of Tigray. Western Tigray, as you can see, is incorporated into this yellowish map. The Oromia region is this dark green, and most of it is in this map incorporated into the Amara state that the Amara nationalists are dreaming to establish. And the one on the right is a map from UN. So this is the map that is currently recognized by the Ethiopian state. Of course, Wallo is not shown here, and some of the North Shawa Oromia regions have been incorporated into Amara state. But this is slightly close to what the Oromos call home, the one on the right. The one on the left includes Finfinne, or what they call Addis Ababa, and large portions of Oromia. So there is a very strong fighting and ongoing war between the Oromo and the Amara, especially this is spearheaded by the Amara. The Amaras are the one who are always the reasons for a clash between the Oromo and the Amara. And just last week, Fano terrorist groups stopped a bus. One day before that, they killed about 5 people. One of Amara nationalists who was in Ethiopian National Defense Force defected into Amara Fano group, crossed over into Oromia. He killed about 5 people, and then some Oromo groups were going to a funeral for the people who have died. And on the next day, the Fano terrorist groups operating in Eswalaga zone of West Oromia stopped the bus and took out about 31 people and slaughtered them, and some of them killing with bullets, some of them with machete, slitting throats, and the likes. And they have made it their feature to slaughter people with machete, so to instill some kind of fear and terror in the Oromo civilians. And this is ongoing. And when we look at this, the war that the Amaras are waging on the Oromia, and the war that is also the Amaras are waging on Tigray and claiming some of the land, and the war that they are waging on Benishangul Gumuz, and of course the war that the central government, the federal government of Ethiopia fights in Oromia state against the Oromo Liberation Army, and in the Amara state right now, the federal government is fighting the Fano extremist groups and what they call nationalist groups. And the Ethiopia government also fought a fierce war with Tigray People Liberation Front, or TPLF. The Ethiopian government also fight of the Oromia state fight with the Somalis. And just last week, one of the Amara activists, Ermias Lagase, on his media was discussing about six wars that's going on in Ethiopia. One is the one between the Oromo and the Amara, and the other is between the federal government and the Amara state, the Amara nationalists or Fano, between Oromo and Somali, and between the Somali and the Afar, between the Anuak and Nuer in Gambela and the like. So he counted about six different wars that is going on in Ethiopia right now. And citing these reasons, he argued that Ethiopia is likely to disintegrate, and he favored the disintegration of Ethiopia like Yugoslavia, in relative to other countries who are facing similar issues like Somalia, Yemen, and Syria. So, why is Ethiopia entertaining this ongoing war between nations? Where else is this kind of war happening? Like when one nation is fighting against the other. Why is Ethiopia entertaining this? And what would this tell about the future of Ethiopia, in your opinion, Denebo?
Thank you. Before that, let me say a few words about the so-called Amhara um, nation or group. I'm inclined to agree with those scholars who assert there is no ethnic group called Amhara, or there is no ethnicity called Amhara. I tend to agree with Professor Masfin Damariam, and also even Andregacho Sige. He wrote a book, didn't he? He's now one of the catalysts in this war when he sold himself to Abiy Ahmed and rented himself to Isaias Afwerki. He wrote a book titled Tulid Nyamnagar, Tulid Aidenagar. And in that book, he mentions and he elaborates the fact that Amhara is not ethnicity, it is rather a cult or group of people who claim they are superior, who claim they are creators of Ethiopia. These could be the command who were subjected to ethnicity for a long time, or it could be Aga, even it could be Oromo. Some of the names they mention is, when you look at them, they say we are the children of Balai Zaleka, so we have to restore the glory of Balai Zaleka. Balai Zaleka was not an Amhara; he was an Oromo, Amharic speaking Oromo. So it is only recently that they started to kind of advance the narrative called, oh no, we are Amhara, we have to fight for Amhara. No, what they are actually at the core, at the center of their movement is the need or the dedication to stifle the national movements for independence of other nations. And these people, their operating manual is one of fascism. I'm not making this up. The leader, um, David Wolde-Georgis, who is in diaspora, he stated, "We Amhara are superiors. We were created to rule over, and we are the ones that created Ethiopia. Therefore, Amhara means Ethiopia, and Ethiopia means Amhara." And they listen to the speeches the scholars make. Um, Taddese, Yilma Taddese, the current Ethiopia's ambassador to the United States, to the African Union, he said clearly, "We Amhara are superiors." And he hasn't withdrawn that statement. Others are ugly, we are beautiful, we are smarter, we are this, we are that. And he even went on to the extent of claiming Amhara are not even Africans. So I'm not surprised they're making these claims. Um, um, I don't know if you've heard, they also are claiming Jerusalem, Israel, because they say, according to the Ethiopian constitution, the first ever written constitution of Ethiopia, 1931, and later revised 1955, they say we are descendants of King Solomon of Israel. Therefore, they clearly state their intention to one day go over and claim Jerusalem. They, it's you might laugh. They even claim Silver Springs in the United States of America, because there are many Amharic-speaking people who live there. And they also claim a city in the UK, a city called Bath, because that was a place where Haile Selassie stayed when he fled the country, because Italy occupied Ethiopia and sought asylum in the UK. So they say Bath is our city. But it's not what they claim. It is the reality on the ground. The current constitution, the regional states, were not delineated based on the historical and demographic occupation of people. If that was done in 1991, all these problems wouldn't happen, because, like, for example, the entire region of northern Oromia is included in the administrative structure, administrative state of Amhara. But the land speaks for itself. Marsa, typical Oromo names, Urgesa, Warraqalu, Warrahimanu. Okay? The people speak Amharic because they were subjected to ethnocide for centuries. They were forced to speak Amharic, but they know Amhara. And in fact, there is no such nation as called ethnicity called Amhara.
When it comes to that argument, I choose to defer. At some point, I was.
I absolutely agree, because what matters is these people are saying today we are Amhara, and we have to accept that. We have to respect that. All I'm trying to say is they are using that as a camouflage to advance their fascistic agenda. That is why they're saying we are the ones who are supposed to have all this land. Gojam is an Oromo land. They're one of Amhara professors that I respect very much, by the name of Teshale Tababu, in his book titled The Making of Modern Ethiopia, he clearly states that Gojam was once Oromo land. It's only because they were forced to adopt Amharic culture, the Tabot Ge'ez culture, that they speak Amharic. And he even goes on to argue at the Battle of Mbabo, when Tekle Manut fought against the Oromo of Mbabo area, he states it was only Amharic speaking Oromo that thought Oromo speaking Oromo. Gojam, the entire Gojam, according to him, is Oromo. So all I'm saying is, if in 1990s, when this federal structure was established, they should have considered that the demographic settlement of people. Uh, if they did that into consideration, this chaos wouldn't have happened. Now, these people are saying, I mean, they are declaring day and night, aren't they? They're saying, Wallaga belongs to Amhara. If Gojam was not initially handled that way, they wouldn't have gone to the extent of saying Wallaga belongs to Amhara. These are the people who say, on one hand, we're not Africans. We are descendants of King Solomon of Israel. But on the other hand, they are saying, we are the ones who should rule this area. The Oromo are newcomers. That's what they're saying. So that is.
Thank you, Denebo. Let me first speak to our viewers, our audience. I just want you to engage with the conversation. Leave your comment. What do you think? Are Amaras supposed to have Gondar and Gojam, or since they came from Yemen or from Israel to the current region that is called Amara? Should they be denied in even a state, or should we leave Gojam and Gondar to them and tell them that they should stop claiming land from other regions? And of course, if they want to become independent, if they want to create their own country, they should go with Gondar and Gojam. And then the rights of the command and no people come into play as well. But when it comes to Oromia, I agree with you, especially Wallo shouldn't have been integrated into Amara state. It should be part of Oromia state. I'm sorry for interrupting people.
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, these are the people who were playing with certain identity about 2 years ago, almost all of them. They were saying, oh, these are the people who were saying, there's no Amara, we're all Ethiopians. And we have to defend Ethiopia. Even now, these hooligans called Fano, when they infiltrate into Oromia, they set villages into fire, they kill civilians, okay? And sometimes they even go on to the extent of stealing dead bodies. The Ethiopian soldiers kill innocent Oromo young men and women. And this group in diaspora, they say, oh, these are Amhara killed. And they try to raise money by making that kind of deception. One example I can give you is in Dambidolo City Square, it was only last year, the Ethiopian soldiers paraded and murdered cold-blooded an Oromo young man by the name of Emmanuel Wundumu, okay, in broad daylight in City Square. The one Amhara group, this Amhara in the quotation in diaspora, they used his picture at the demonstration in the United States of America saying, oh, this is one of the Amharas that is killed. And they created GoFundMe account and raised money, which they used to send it to arm these hooligans called Fano. You mentioned earlier about the Fantale district of Oromia. Look, even the land that they're coming from, whether we're talking about the Bulga, whether we're talking about Malkajilo is, they say, it's one of the districts in Amhara region. Okay, Malkajilo is an Oromo land. It's the main land of the Oromo Karayu tribe that they used for grazing. But because they were backed by the government, they were armed by the government, They've got the power. They fought. They pushed the Karayu Oromo from their land. Okay, and then they made Amhara part. And every year, let me tell you, Daniel, every year I've lived there. I've seen it for myself. Okay, whenever fighting breaks out between the Oromo Karayu tribes and the neighboring Amhara, the Amharas are backed by the government army, and they fight and they displace the Oromo and they occupy their land, and that land becomes part of Amhara region. They call it Aura Godana. Aura Godana is the center, by the way, the center of the Karayu. I worked and lived there for myself. I've seen it. What happened is these people come one as beggars and as daily laborers, and they make makeshift camps there. They cut trees, make charcoal, and gradually they settle there. And whenever fighting breaks out between the Karayu Oromo and the neighboring Argoba, they use that as a chance and they expand it. That is how Korke, the town they are now claiming, they call it Auragodanas only because at some point the Ethiopian Road Authority made a camp there. That's what they named it after. Otherwise, it's called Korke. So that is how they expand. You know, the very spot where last year the Oromo Gada leaders were massacred by Ethiopian army. I call it Ethiopian army, even though they speak Afan Oromo because they were ordered by the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. That very spot, the next day, they went there, erected a banner saying, "This is Amhara land." So they have been doing this for years and years. But what happened now is they've gained more power because the Amhara regional army, or what they call special force, that invaded Tigray, by the way. That invaded Tigray alongside the Ethiopian Defense Forces. Now, because they were disappointed with the peace agreement signed in Pretoria, they were dissatisfied. They felt Abiy Ahmed stabbed them in the back, the same way Eritreans are feeling, disappointed, and started to fight up the government of Abiy Ahmed. They are using the same weapons Abiy Ahmed gave them to fight Tigray. So that is the same weapon they're using to invade villages in the border regions of Oromia. I shouldn't call it the border regions because Oromia had already been cut and given to them. Northern Oromia, like I mentioned earlier, the regions of even they even claiming Darra. Okay, Gojam shouldn't have been included in Amhara region. These are the way you should gauge is, look, they are making noise about the Oromo children learning, in Afan Oromo, when Sudan has occupied more than 250 kilometers square. Sudan that is now ravaging by civil war, by the way. It's not very far from Gondar. Had it not been for the civil war, they could have, gone to the extent of occupying Lake Tana. Now they're not saying anything about Sudanese occupation of that part of Gondar, because Gondar obviously is the land of command. But they make noise day and night about about Oromo kids studying in Afan Oromo, or about the Anole statue. So if you see them from what they tell us, that what their objective is, why are they fighting with the defense force, their clear objective is they want to make Ethiopia Amara again. That's what they tell us. Would that happen? I really doubt very much. I doubt very much. Because today, the Oromo are more unified than ever before. And the neighboring other nations as well, the Benishangul Gumuz nation, the Gambela nation, they are all unified and fighting for their own independence. And I can understand their frustration when Ethiopia vanishes. Everyone has got his own identity. Whether we're talking about Tigray or Kemant or Ago or these are the nations in that region. The region shouldn't have been called Amhara region, by the way. Because how about the Kemant nation? How about the Ago nation? How about the Awi? Wagmira? So these are nations with their own identities, with their own worldview, with their own psychological makeup, and they know who they are. But the people, these hooligans, and those who are supporting the hooligans are genuinely worried because they haven't got their own established identity, and their motive is based on hatred towards the Oromo and other nations. They're going to lose. They are going to lose because they are, jumping against the brick wall. And these are the groups that are at international level that are labeled terrorists. These are groups that have conducted heinous crime against the people of Tigray, and that have continued to conduct violence in Oromia, in various parts of Oromia. And these, again, we shouldn't forget, these are the groups that were working with the Ethiopian government and that were given military training, weapon, and all the logistics by the Ethiopian government. So for me, if you ask me for my genuine opinion, the line between Fano and the Ethiopian government is really very, very blurry. Very blurry. It's only because of their ego, they wanted more, that they are fighting with the government, but they're using the fighting they are conducting with the Ethiopian government as a camouflage to intensify the attack on civilians that they have perpetrated in the Oromo land. So that's how I take it, Daniel.
Thank you, Denebo. When we look at the Oromo struggle and the Oromo claims in terms of map what stands for the Oromia state and Oromia country, much of Gojam, Gondar are not part of the map that we know. And so I would leave it to our audiences whether Oromo should claim Gojam and whether historical context gives us the right to claim Gojam as part of Oromia. But I wouldn't go as far as that. I believe whether they came from other places, probably they are. Now we have close to 20 million Amaras in Ethiopia, in the Ethiopian Empire. And I would argue they should be allowed to leave and call Gojam and Gondar maybe parts of those forms. And they have to negotiate with the command, with the Aga, with Awi and others who rightfully claim those states as well. When it comes to the conflict and their inclination to go after other nations like the Tigray and the Oromo, I believe it wouldn't serve even if Ethiopia disintegrates and becomes different nations, different countries. you need to live amicably as neighbors. And what the Amara people are currently doing would, we would predict there might be an ongoing war between the Amara and other nations that they want to steal land from. So I believe it's not in the best interest of the Amara people, especially the well-meaning Amara people, to go after the Tigray, to go after the Oromos and claim their land. Even if Ethiopia is integrated, that would create, very animosity between this nation that would come up, and so we would expect war like the war that took place between Tigray and, of course, between Ethiopia and Eritrea in 1998 and 2000. And so all evidences and all the current issues and events that's taking place in Ethiopia point us toward the disintegration of Ethiopia. And of course, like some of Ethiopian activists and media people are saying, that is going to be probably better for Ethiopia rather than continue to bleed each other. And when we look at Ethiopia and look at other countries, I don't find any parallel. I don't find any other country where the nations within that state are divided like Ethiopia and fight each other, they bleed each other, and terrorist activities are taking place in mass and on ongoing basis. And so this stem from how Ethiopia is created, and the solution I see is Ethiopia should say goodbye to nations that are being forcibly incorporated and being kept by force. But when we look at that in the perspective of nations, and whether that is African countries, African citizens, and or Western powers, when it comes to the independence of nations like the Oromia state, the Somali, the Tigray, very few countries or very few people welcome it and or see it as positive outcome of what is going on in Ethiopia. And can we say something about that? Why would, for example, the American government say they are pro the territorial integrity of Ethiopia? The European countries also have the same opinion about the outcome of what is going on in Ethiopia right now. And some African countries perceive Ethiopia as, a supporter of their liberation movement from colonial powers. Is that some kind of myth? Is that the reality? What do we have? I'm back to
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Thank you. Before I reflect on this point, shall I take a minute or
Mhm.
two to add to what you said about Gojam and Northern Oromia?
Yes, yes.
Look, the starting point, or the foundation, or the framework within which all these matters must be handled is the constitution, the current constitution of Ethiopia. Yes, the northern part of Oromia, the land of Raya Azebo. I'm talking about Dase, Kombolcha, Marsa, Urgesa, Warahimanu, and all those land that were given to Amhara administrative structure, or whether we're talking about Gojam, our starting point is the constitution. So if tomorrow Opidio or the team of, say, hypothetically, you can't rule that out. You can't say they won't do it. If Ethiopia is disintegrating, the PP will will rush to declare Oromia's independence because they want to rule. They want to have a country which they rule. and Ethiopia is vanishing, then they're going to have a country. That country would be Oromia. Okay. So if hypothetically the Oromian regional government, the Chafe Oromia, unilaterally declares Oromia's independence, the starting point should be the constitution. It is the territory that are recognized in this constitution as part of Oromia that will become the member of the global community of state, or part of Oromia. The rest, um, could be, like I said, Northern Oromia, Wallo, or Gorjam. It should be up to those people to decide for themselves whether they want to be included in Amhara region or want to join the Oromo. So again, the second point I wanted to raise in relation to this is some people say, oh no, Oromia cannot become independent because Oromia is surrounded by different nations. Can you give me a single country in the whole world that is not surrounded by states, by other people? No. Even today, there are fightings and violence. The moment Oromia becomes independent, the relationship between Oromia and Afar, the relationship between Oromia and Amhara, the relationship between Oromia and Ethiopia, Oromia and Sidama, would be governed by international law, by international tools, norms. So if there would be a problem, then that would be taken to the international court and decision would be made. So that would even be a lot better than the current situation. But at the moment, the Oromo communities that are facing atrocities from Fano, they cannot go and seek protection from the International Court of Justice because that right is taken by Ethiopia. So that's what needs to be understood. And with regard to the question that you raised, US wouldn't allow, US would like to see territorial integrity of Ethiopia, the West, and this and that. Yes, that's right. They have to respect territorial integrity of Ethiopia. They also have to respect the rights of people for self-determination. They were saying the same thing, by the way. I mean, Yugoslavia disappeared in 1992. Okay, up until the time Yugoslavia disappeared, US and the United Nations and the Western countries in 1991, or in the end of 1991, they were saying the same thing. Oh, we stand for territorial integrity of Yugoslavia. But that hasn't stopped those nations from restoring their independence. So the right to independence of nations is not given by the United States of America or by Canada, Britain, or the Western world. Remember the example I gave you earlier. By the end of the Second World War, okay, say by 1950, the total number of countries, independent countries, was less than 60. Less than 60. Today, we have more than 195. I mean, it's tripled, okay? These countries regained their independence not because the United States allowed them or prohibited them, or the international community allowed them or prohibited them. It's because they are entitled to that right, and that right is backed by international law. What international law are we talking about? Let's talk about Oromia. There are 3 major legal frameworks that support Oromia's independence. as a basic human rights. The first one being Ethiopia's constitution. I mean, it's a ruling, the I mean, it's a founding block, because from international law point of view, there is no such law that says this nation should be independent and that nation should not be independent. Any country can, any nation, any group can declare independence unilaterally. Some countries recognize that independence, some countries don't recognize that independence. But, listen, but if the constitution of the main state, if the constitution of the host state, in our case, if the constitution of Ethiopia provides for independence as a right, I'm referring to Article 39, and a nation declares independence based on that, recognition, given referendum is conducted, of course, given referendum is conducted, then recognition will be automatic. That is one law, one framework. And the other is international. What does international law says about Oromia's independence? The founding block of the international law is the UN Charter. Even the preamble of the UN Charter, the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and articles in the UN Charter, and also later on, the UN Charter was modified and re-modified at different times. There were two landmarks. The first one is Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples. This is Declaration December 14, 1960. I'm talking about the Declaration of the UN General Assembly. And the United Nations Declaration on the Principles of International Law concerning Friendly Relationship and Cooperation among the states. Those two declarations, 1960 and 1970, are the ones that have elaborated, clarified the UN Charter, and as a result of those declarations and subsequent rulings by the International Court of Justice, of the referendum.
I think the Nebo's audio is disconnected. The Nebo audio with us. Yeah, keep.
So can you remind me what point I got disconnected?
Yeah, so you discussed about the two declarations, the 1960 and 1970.
Oh, right, yeah.
The charters have
Yeah,
been.
I was. Yeah, I mentioned about the Constitution, and from the international point of view, or from the global community point of view, one is the UN Charter. The UN Charter recognizes all people's right to independence. But when the UN Charter was drafted, the so-called people were not identified clearly. Was it talking about those people that were occupied by the Europeans, or are we talking about people that were occupied by other people, and blah, blah, blah? Those things were not clear when the United Nations, the Charter of the United Nations was drafted. But later, in 1960, declaration, resolution adopted by the UN General Assembly, resolution 1415, it made it clear that people, no matter who they were occupied by, no matter who they were invaded by, are entitled to determine their destiny. And the subsequent one even made it clearer. I think it was the International Court of Justice advisory opinion that suggested South Africa should withdraw from Namibia, that made a landmark and made the concept of the right to independence to be considered as right erga omnes. So even above all this, there are other facilitating factors. Okay, these are the rights that apply to every nation. Okay, it's based on these provisions that Scotland is demanding independence. There is no human right violations issues in Scotland. Okay, but still they are pushing for independence. When it comes to Oromia, because Ethiopia has been conducting genocide and violence against the Oromo, and because Ethiopia has now declared and been implementing genocide, declared, by declared, I'm talking about the what the Oromia Parliament said in December 2020, when they were asked about why haven't you been able to contain the Oromo Liberation Army, and the spokesperson said we couldn't contain the Oromo Liberation Army because the Oromo Liberation Army are operating within the Oromo. Therefore, the only way we can handle this matter is, you need to dry up the sea in order to get rid of the fish. So that is what they have been doing. So even if Article 39 was not there, and there were no there were no other provisions, the fact that Ethiopia is conducting genocide against the Oromo necessitates Oromo's independence. So if Oromia unilaterally declares independence, regardless of the constitution, this is considered as remedial independence, because Ethiopia is conducting genocide against the Oromo, and independence should be taken as a remedy. So it's a multiple layer.
Thank you, Denebo. You have gone at length explaining why we don't have to worry about whether the US or European countries should allow or support the independence of Oromia and other countries that are struggling, fighting for their independence. And you cited that after the Second World War, there were about 60 countries, and now we have about 195 countries. So the countries after the Second World War almost tripled in number. And also you cited about Yugoslavia, when Yugoslavia was in turmoil around 1990s. The US and other first powers, first countries have not supported independence of the constituent countries. But the countries, it has happened. Yugoslavia has disintegrated, and we have countries like Kosovo and others coming into being. And so it doesn't matter whether the other big nations in this world would support your independence or not. Like, it depends on whether you will do it, right? And then you stated about the 3 legal frameworks, 2 UN and 1 Ethiopian. When we look at the Ethiopian part, I usually have reservation to call it really, it should be a basis for our struggle, and it should also, and I don't believe it guarantees our independence, because the way it ends makes the situation like almost impossible, because when it comes to Oromia, the council or parliament, the regional parliament that's in power currently, is the product of an oppressive Ethiopian regime, and they don't represent the Oromo people. They didn't come to election. They have been appointed, or they are party members of the former EPRDF and current Prosperity Party, and they don't stand, they don't speak on behalf of the Oromo people, and I don't have any trust in them coming out sometime asking for the independence of Oromia. According to that rule, according to that constitution, especially Article 39, sub-article 5 says the 2/3 of or the majority of the members of the council of that state should request for the independence of the nation. That means in our case, at this moment, who is in the council of regional government is the Opidio, or what they call Oromia Prosperity Party now. And I don't expect them to go out and demand independence for Oromia. So for us, that article is not helpful as is right now. I believe it has to be amended so that it should be the voice of the population. It shouldn't be the voice of the council of the regional government that should be requesting the independence. It should be the people. And the Oromo people are demanding independence, and that should be what, what the Ethiopian government as well as other stakeholders should take into consideration, regardless of what the regional council is. Or and in order to resolve the Oromo issue, the Oromia regional state should be rebuilt, should be reformed, and it should integrate the Oromo Liberation Front, the Oromo Liberation Army at least, and then we can say our voice can be, heard. Our voice will reflect the feeling and the demands of the Oromo people when that happens. Otherwise, as is right now, Article 39 does not guarantee the Oromo's right to independence because the way is
By the way, Ethiopia is not respecting its constitution anyway. That has gone through the window. By the way, I've only mentioned it. It gives legal backing from the international point of view to the Oromo. I mean, Ethiopia is not prepared to even consider that. That is why the Oromo Liberation Army have taken gun, because Ethiopia is not ready to even talk about it. But the importance of that constitution comes in from the international legal point of view. Say, obviously, the Oromo Liberation Army are pushing forward, and if the Oromo Liberation Army get to the city, even without referendum, they can declare independence, and that would give the fact that the constitution of Ethiopia gives a kind of legal backing. Apart from that, I mean, it's like expecting honey from butterfly, expecting Ethiopia to respect that. No, Ethiopia is not in the position to respect it. If Ethiopia respected its constitution, there would be chances of Ethiopia surviving, continuing. Now, Ethiopia has already committed suicidal by rejecting its own constitution.
Thank you, Denebo. And your network is choppy. I don't know if disabling some of your devices might give you more Wi-Fi power if you are connected to Wi-Fi. I think we are also getting closer to the conclusion of our discussion today. One of our audiences asked once a state is established through like an imperial system, would it stay imperial, or would would it transform itself into a country? So what do you say about that? Is Ethiopia is still an empire or it's a country? I think you discussed about that at the beginning, but some of just joined.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't think empires could survive longer than certain periods unless they make adjustment.
Kind of
One of those empires that made adjustment.
And it transformed itself and it's no longer an empire but a country to
That's what I'm that's what I'm trying to say. They need to make adjustment, and they need to accept this international norms, global principles, particularly when it comes to the right to self-determination. I think one best example we can mention is the United Kingdom, um, um,
Yeah,
and Northern Ireland. Okay,
about that. Like we have about four
when
countries in
first
the
of
United
all,
Kingdom, right?
yeah, there are four countries within the United Kingdom, and these four countries they came to get first of all, even though they were invaded by force, they at some point they signed some kinds of agreements to stay together. Okay, they call it in the United Kingdom they call it the Act of the Union, and that is one. And second, they do respect their rights. First of all, there are no human right violations that necessitates independence. But again, independence itself is taken as human rights, even if when there are no violations, when there are no killings, when there are no political repression. The best example for that is Europe. In Europe, there are many, more than 25 similar movements, similar to that of Scotland. The Scottish people, they are not suffering persecution from the Westminster or from the government of Britain. No, they're not. They're not marginalized. There is no single Scottish political prisoner. And Scottish people held referendum in 2014. And now, because things have changed, I think they are pushing for another independence. And it's very interesting. The Scottish government, the current Scottish government, they have even went on to establish the Minister of Independence. That this is a government group that is tasked with advancing independence. So that shows that the need for independence is taken as basic human right. But when it comes to Oromia, there are multiple factors that necessitate, that accentuates the Oromia's need for independence, because Ethiopia has declared genocide. Ethiopia is conducting genocidal atrocities against the Oromo, indiscriminate killings, using famine as weapon, okay, using drones and all kinds of artilleries to attack the Oromo farmers, Oromo children, Oromo women. They have destroyed schools. They have spoiled water resources, and they have shamelessly declared to wipe out the Oromo. I mean, Abiy Ahmed went to Kenya, the prime minister. He said he was determined. He said that on the 9th of December 2020, when he said, we must eliminate the OLF. How are they determined to eliminate the OLF? By wiping out the Oromo. So these are the factors that necessitate, because it is not for the first time Ethiopia is perpetrating atrocities against the Oromo. It has always been perpetrating atrocities against the Oromo. So that is why the Oromia's independence should be taken as a remedy, not just because it is Oromo's right. And finally, let me say this. Even if Ethiopia was not conducting atrocities, genocide against the Oromo, even if Ethiopia was not violating human rights, still Ethiopia is a liability to the Oromo. It is a liability to the Oromo. Even if there was no war, even if there is peaceful relationship, still Ethiopia is liability to the Oromo because of the way it is constituted and because of the crimes that Ethiopia has still been liable when it comes to relationship with African countries uh, the treaties that Ethiopia has signed with other countries. Like, for example, if you take Egypt over the water resources, more than 70% of the water that goes to Nile comes from Oromia, from tributary rivers of Oromia. So, but the Oromo have never signed that agreement in 1902. So maintaining Ethiopia, but the moment Oromia becomes independent, Oromia becomes legal entity, that treaty wouldn't apply to the Oromo, to Oromia. It would be nullified. Mind you, Daniel, today Ethiopia is borrowing money to buy firearms, to buy drones that are used to kill Oromo children. If we have to keep Ethiopia in Oromia, tomorrow our children are going to pay for these drones. So that's why I said it is liability to the Oromo, even if other things were not, even if Ethiopia was not conducting genocide. But now, because Ethiopia is conducting genocide against the Oromo, and that genocide is declared by intention and it's being going on, it should be taken as Oromia's independence should be considered remedy. That's what makes it different to the other parts of the world. Empires can transform themselves if certain criteria are fulfilled. In fact, if they respect basic human rights and international norms.
Thank you, Denebo, for sharing your insights and perspectives today. And to our viewers, please continue this conversation in the comment, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more engaging discussion on the fate of Ethiopia as it is unfolding right now. We'll continue to get back to this in another round of discussions. For today, I think we have touched upon many important points is why Ethiopia is likely to disintegrate, and also why it is better for the Oromo, for the Tigray, for the Somali, for our kept in that empire by force, and the citizens of those nations are enduring a constant attack under the Ethiopian government, as well as those who claim they established Ethiopia, and they claim land from different regions, including Oromia, Tigray, and the likes. So, thank you for watching for today. This has been 15 Minutes Network. I'm Daniel Debaba. Thank you, Denebo.
Thank you, Daniel.